Thank you for joining us for Plan Your Pivot, Changing Careers Without Scrapping Everything You've Worked For. Today's presentation is brought to you by Bankable. And before we get started, I'd like to go over just a few housekeeping items. For those of you who've attended our webinars in the past, you may notice that things look a little different from what you're used to. Bankable builds on what you've grown to expect from Level Up and offers even more great content with fresh perspectives on money, career, and balance. So welcome to Bankable. Feel free to follow us on Facebook and join our exclusive LinkedIn group. Links to both of those are in the Resources tab on your webinar console. And at the end of the webinar, please fill out the survey to let us know what you think of our new look. My name is Kim Horner, and I'm a social media editor here at Forbes. And I have the pleasure of introducing Adrian Granzella Larssen, who's the editor-at-large of The Muse. The Muse is the career platform that's helped more than 50 million people find and succeed at their dream jobs. Adrian is a nationally recognized expert on career transitions, navigating the workplace and job searching in the digital world. She's been featured in Forbes, Mashable, Real Simple, Bustle, Entrepreneur Inc., and on national TV networks. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm so sorry about the technical glitches in the beginning.
You know, it would not be a webinar if we did not have technical difficulties. So thanks for having me, and thank you so much to everyone on the line for your patience.
Thank you. And let's jump right in. I know some of you already filled out this poll, but we're going to try to do it again. How soon do you want to change careers? As soon as humanly possible, in the next few years, or not sure? So basically, are you looking to change right now, or do you want to, see how things go with your current career and kind of ease your way into it? Or maybe you're just not sure, and that's why you're joining us today. So now that we've done this poll again, we could see that 63% of people want to change jobs as soon as humanly possible. So not so surprising because you're here on a Career Pivot webinar, but you're in the right place.
Yes, you are, and I am sorry to hear that that you all want to get out of your current careers, but I'm so happy that you have joined me today, and I'm really excited to talk about some really actionable things you can do to get you out of your current job and into a new career as soon as humanly possible. So thanks again for joining me. If you have any other technical issues or sound issues, just type it into the Q&A and we will figure it out. But let's get started. So I'm assuming that you are all here today because you're feeling one of a few different things. So maybe you are totally miserable in your current job. Maybe your industry has changed and you are hoping to change with it into a new career path. Maybe you look at your boss's job and think there's no way I want to do that in 5 years. Or maybe you're just kind of bored and feeling really drawn to something else. So I am here with you today because I have felt every single one of these things. And today I want to share with you my experience and some of the things that worked for me in the hopes that they work for you too. So let's rewind to 2008. This slide was me. I had my dream job, or so I thought. I was working in my third job, and at the time I took it, it was my dream job. I was a marketing manager at a beauty company. And pretty quickly after I started, about 6 months in, I realized, I've been in marketing for a while, but I'm not great at it, and I'm not fulfilled by working in the beauty industry. And when I really started thinking about what I loved, I realized that the only thing I liked about my job and the job that I had had before, or any job I'd ever had, was writing. And maybe you've experienced something similar. I think often at some point in our lives we have an idea of something that we love or something that we're interested in, but we don't always pay attention to it. And maybe that's because we think it's not a money-making career or not a viable career path, or maybe just because a different kind of job falls in our laps. But even if it's not quite right, we just keep moving along that path because it's the path of least resistance. In my case, I sort of got a job doing something, and I got that next job, and I got promoted, and after a while, I woke up one day and found that I was, 7 or 8 years into a career path that I didn't want to be in. All that said, it can feel really, really scary to make a change. because you look at these other jobs out there that you might be interested in, and they have nothing to do with what you have been working towards, with the things that are currently on your resume. And at the same time, there are people you're competing with who have been in the field for years or even decades, and how do you stand a chance? And maybe there are even very real things you need to do, like get different experience or go back to school to even be eligible to do the jobs that you're interested in. And all of that can feel really, really overwhelming. So that's why I see people doing one of three things. One is sticking with the status quo, sort of resigning yourself to stay stuck in this career that you hate and just keep doing it because retirement's only, 25, 35 years away. Or there's the opposite approach, sort of quitting your job, selling your house, sleeping on your brother's couch for a few years, and going back and starting an entry-level role in a completely different career path. And the third option is what I like to call the masquerade approach. So you try to transform your resume into something it's not, and you send it out over and over and cross your fingers that someone either won't see through it or they'll take a chance on you anyway. And there's a lot of frustration in all of these options, which is why I'm really excited to share that there is another way. And the reason I know there's another way is because I did it. So my current job, or my last job, was building the editorial team at the Muse. And I changed careers from this marketing job into an editorial career path without starting from scratch, without starting over, and without bait and switching anyone. So that's what I'm really excited to talk to you about today, how to change careers without scrapping everything you've worked for already. Now, before we get started, I want to be really clear that this isn't a simple process. It takes perseverance and it takes patience, and in some cases it does take going back to school or investing time or money. And in all cases it involves time after your already packed work week. But if you're really committed to changing careers, this is a formula that I have used and that so many people I know have used to make career changes from all kinds of different fields. So here are just a few examples. I know a woman who ran investor relations for a hedge fund, and she is now a copywriter.
Wow.
I know.
Big pivot.
Big pivot. I know a paralegal who is now a front-end engineer at a startup, and a customer service manager who is now in content marketing, both for a company and on the side, working for herself. And these are just examples. There are so many others who have made what you and I would consider really dramatic career pivots, but they did it. So in the next half hour or so, I'm going to give you an overview of how to use what you have already and some really actionable baby steps to help you get started on the path to your own career change.
Great. And if you have any questions along the way, please drop them in the Q&A section and we'll get to as many as possible. And we're also starting an Ask Bankable section of Bankable, so we'll be answering your questions after the webinar as well.
All right. So the three rules we're going to cover today are: rule number one, you have to know where you want to go because the grass is not always greener. Rule number two, you have to get experience because no one is going to give you a job without it. And rule number three is you have to dress for the job you want. And this has very little to do with your outfit choices and everything to do with how you present yourself, both online and off. So let's start with rule number one. You have to know where you want to go. So it's actually much more common than you'd think that people do everything they can to make a career change. Maybe they quit their job and they go to school for something else, and then they realize once they're in that job that, well, that's not really the right career path for them either. And the truth is that some grass is greener and some isn't, and there are things that you'll love and things that you'll hate about every single career path out there. And the only way you're going to know what those things are and whether this move is really the right one for you is if you learn everything you can about that grass and you hang out there for a while. So how do you do that? I'm going to walk through how to go back to school, maybe in the traditional sense, but first, and much more importantly, in the non-traditional sense. So the very first step is to do some research about you and what you want, and get very, very clear on your own career values and your own goals. And this is a really super helpful step for anyone who's thinking, well, I know I want to change, but I'm not really sure what that change is. But even if you do know what that change is or what you want it to be, this step is important because being really clear on your strengths and your priorities and your goals will mean that you'll be thinking about this move in the right way, and you're more likely to set yourself up for success when it comes to jobs and companies that will be a good fit for you. So this is a big important step that we could sit here and talk about for 3.5 hours or maybe even days. I can't do justice in an hour. So for the sake of not keeping you here all day, I'm going to recommend 2 books that are really, really great on this subject. So the first one, The New Rules of Work, is a career book by the founders of the Muse. And it covers all kinds of topics and goes deep into job search and workplace skills. But my favorite part of the book is an exercise that really helps you outline your career values. So I found it really helpful in articulating some of the things that we care about, but we don't often take the time to think about when we are in full job search mode. But the truth is, when you align yourself and align your career with your values, whether that is flexibility or creativity or learning, you're much more likely to be happy. So that's a great exercise. I also really like Jenny Blake's book called Pivot, and it's really helpful in thinking through what you currently bring to the table in terms of your skills and experience that you've gathered from all of the jobs in your past. So she gives really step-by-step instructions for using that to think about how that might translate to what you want to do next, and do little experiments to help you understand if those things will work and make you happy. And the other thing that I think both of these books do and are helpful in is confidence building. Pivot in particular shares all of these real-world examples that help you realize that A, you are totally not the first person who has ever done this. It is actually so much more common than you think. And B, that your strengths and experiences can actually be translated in a lot of different ways, not just the way that you have already been using them. And that confidence is really important when you move on to the next phase of this process, which is to learn everything you can. So once you have an idea in your head about another career path that is interesting to you, it's really important to learn everything you can about it, and to spend some time researching the job or the jobs that you are interested in, everything from who thrives in these types of roles, the different types of paths for advancement, what people need to do to break in, trends in the field, and so on. And this isn't just about reading, although books and websites can be really helpful when you're learning. But as you're going about this, you can start to follow people in this world. So whether it is industry experts, newsletters that highlight interesting things going on in the field, stalking people on LinkedIn and seeing how they got to where they are, what they're reading, what they're sharing and recommending, following them on social media, just really immersing yourself in anything that you can get your hands on online about this field. And when you're really serious about making a change, my rule of thumb is that you should be spending at least an hour a day doing this, whether you are getting up early or it's the first thing you do when you get home or an hour before bed, but really doing everything that you can to immerse yourself in this world regularly and every day. And the reason I say every day is because you'll start to understand whether you are excited about this. Like, are you excited to wake up early and read everything you can about this job? Or are you kind of dreading it? If you are kind of dreading it, it might mean that this isn't something that you want to spend every day on, and that's fine. That's great information to have. If you do find yourself really excited and sort of lose track of time, you can move on and know that that excitement is there. And you can proceed to one of my favorite steps in the learning process, which is taking classes. So a lot of people, especially mid-career professionals who are making a change, think, I already have a degree, I don't want to go back to school, and I think that's really fair. But there's another benefit of going to classes, and that again is starting to learn about something and figuring out, do you like this? Is this something that you want to rush home to do, or are you dreading it? So in my case, I took several writing classes in all different areas, feature article writing, ad copy writing, personal essay writing, and each one of those classes really illuminated what I loved and what I didn't. And I learned some surprising things about myself and my skills that then informed the career change that I made in the future. And there are all kinds of classes you can take, online and off, free and paid. I recommend starting small with something that's free or relatively cheap, and then if you do find that you're really engaged and really excited, you can then invest something that is more expensive or more time intensive.
So when you say taking classes, you don't mean go back to school full time and get another degree. You mean just take, a little online course to see what you think of this new career path.
Absolutely, yeah. And again, in some cases, you might need to go back to school if you want to be a doctor. Probably need to go to school for that.
Can't take an online webinar for that.
No. But in the case of the paralegal who became a front-end engineer, she didn't go back to a 4-year computer science program. She took online classes, and there are free online classes where you can learn how to code or do a little bit of it, and then if you decide it's something that you really love, that's when you can invest in something that is a bit more
like a certification course or back to school if you want to be a doctor.
Exactly.
Awesome.
The next step, and sort of kind of a dovetail of this, is getting to know people in this field. I'm pretty sure that everyone on this call knows the power of networking if you read Forbes.com, but I think it bears repeating in this case that if there's one thing that's going to boost your career change the most, it's meeting everyone you can in the field you want to be in and telling other people, even that are not in your field, that you are thinking about making this change. So you definitely can do this sort of traditional way of going to networking events and joining professional organizations. I personally don't love that approach and think that it's more of a shotgun approach, whereas you can often have better luck with more targeted outreach. So reaching out to people who have the types of jobs that you are interested in, or that work for companies that you might be interested in, and seeing if they're up for chatting with you, giving you advice, meeting up with you for coffee. And not everyone is up for it, but in my experience, there are plenty of people out there who are happy to chat. And then you not only learn more about whatever it is that you are looking for, you also have a new person in your network and a person that's related to the field you want to go in. To give you a quick example here, so a friend of mine is a lawyer. She is in litigation. She's at a big firm, and this is not her dream job. What she really wants to be doing is business development for a food company, specifically a food startup. Yes. Sounds awesome. But it's a big gap. So what she's been doing is been reaching out to people who have interesting jobs in that world, totally cold, just explaining her interest and seeing if people are up for meeting up with her. And this definitely has not led to a job, but through the people she has met, it has led to invitations to join a nonprofit board and to be part of a food-related professional organization. And these are things that she didn't have access to before that can also be put on her resume later when she is applying for jobs. We're going to talk about that more in a bit, but the point is, sort of don't be afraid to reach out. This takes time, but it can be very, very useful. Let's move on to rule number 2, which is you have to get experience. So if you were to rewind a few slides, if you had ever considered the masquerade approach, this rule is really important. So one of the most common things I hear from career changers is, I know I can do this job if somebody would just take a chance on me. Right. And I think in many cases that is absolutely true. However, for the most part today, companies are looking for people who can come in and do the job on day one. Mm-hmm. They don't necessarily want to take a chance on people, especially when they are looking at other people who may have been doing this job for years and years. So you do need to get real tangible experience before you make a change, before employers will start to consider you as an applicant. The good news is, in many cases today, you don't have to get that experience at a full-time job. You don't have to start from day one. You don't have to start from an intern-level position. In some cases, if you do it carefully, you can even get that experience while you are still getting a paycheck from your current job. And again, I think this is actually very important to do before you take the full leap, because how are you going to know if it's something that you love doing if you haven't actually done it before? So here are some of the things that I have seen work, both in my own experience and for others. A big one, and I know there was a great webinar on this a couple of weeks ago, is freelance work and side gigs. Yeah. So assuming that it is not a conflict of interest with your current job, a lot of career changers I see do freelance work and side hustles in the type of work that they want to be doing. And sometimes these are really small things, just nights and weekends, but you get to see if you like it, and in some cases you can make a little bit of money too. So I definitely did this. I did some freelance writing on the side of my marketing job, and that's a really easy one to do, but you really can do this for all different fields, for design, for social media, marketing, project management. Again, just make sure it's allowed by your current job, but even if it's not, there are ways that you can get creative. And these are things like joining a board or helping a nonprofit out or doing some volunteer work. Those are things that employers typically don't have any qualms with, as long as it is not interfering with your current job. Another idea is, and we've done this a little bit at the Muse, is had adult internships or fellowships.
I love that.
Yeah, it's definitely strange to be the 30-year-old intern in the room, but we've done several of them at the Muse, and it has been the thing that has pivoted their careers from whatever they were doing before to a job in writing or editorial. It's been that role on their resume that has helped them get a full-time job.
That's awesome.
So yeah. Another thing is you can try something new at your current job. So this certainly doesn't work in any company, but a lot of times if you are killing it in your role, you're meeting all of your duties and responsibilities, you can look for places within your company that need an extra set of hands. So this is what I did sort of between my beauty job and my job at the Muse. I got a job in the marketing department at a health center, and I was hired to do marketing, but there was also a publications department that worked really closely with that department. And so on top of my current responsibilities, I was like, knock on their door and say, hey, do you guys need any help with the magazine this month? And they always did. They were always happy to have an extra set of hands. And it was really what helped me pivot into doing some writing, some editing, and ultimately running the magazine and using that experience to get my job at the Muse. And that's what I call a bridge job. We're going to talk about that a little bit more in a bit. But the point of this is to get creative, to figure out if you can't go from your current job to a full-time job doing something else, which is very difficult, figure out ways to make your own experience. Move on to rule number 3. You have to dress for the job you want. And again, this doesn't mean buying a new wardrobe, although in some cases, like my friend who moved from investment management to copywriting in a startup, she definitely needed to. She was like, I don't have any jeans.
Oh, no.
How can I wear to work now? So really this is about making sure that the story that you are telling through your online presence, your social media profiles, and what you say and what you do with people offline is all pointing you towards your new path. You're not stuck in your old one. So when someone Googles you, for example, or looks you up on LinkedIn, you want to look like you were meant to do this job. You're not stuck in the past. So if we go back to my lawyer friend who wants to work at a food startup, if you look at her LinkedIn profile right now, or her resume, it looks very lawyery. So I'm not going to show you her profile, but it looks like what you'd think a lawyer's profile would look like. It's a black suit, a pressed button-down shirt. Her job her title on LinkedIn is her job title at her firm, and her work experience is all related to the work she's done as a lawyer. With that said, she's working through the process right now of transforming that LinkedIn profile and making herself not just look like a lawyer, but about someone who is really immersed in the food space. So talking about her work with the boards that she's on and the professional organizations that she's part of, the fundraising and strategy work that she's done, talking about the issues that she's passionate about in her LinkedIn summary and headline. Her strategy and your strategy should be telling a new story. So I want to be very clear that this is not about changing your identity overnight. It is much more about kind of combining who you are and where you're going into a new story. So this slide sort of breaks that down into a formula. And that formula is, first, your transferable skills. So what do you bring to the table no matter what job you have? This can be things like dealing with difficult people or data and analytics skills or public speaking, things that can be helpful whether you are a salesperson or an interior designer. And if you're not sure, think about the things that you've been great at your whole life, every job you've ever had, and even the things that people tell you that you're good at that you kind of shrug off. Often that is actually a great way to identify your strengths, to think about the things that you're like, oh no, everybody can do that, I'm not good at that. But people don't compliment you for things that everybody is good at. So that can be a secret way to kind of find your strengths. Secondly, your additive skills. So if you think about the job that you want to go into, what does your background bring to the table that more traditional candidates might not necessarily have? So for my case, I was applying for these editorial jobs against people who had been writers and editors for their whole careers. But I had experience in project management, people management, market research, some of these things that traditional writers and editors do not have. And, you know, as the sort of writing world has evolved, many journalism jobs have required expertise in content marketing. So this experience was actually very helpful. And I made that become part of my story. So my LinkedIn profile, actually the first line of my LinkedIn profile says, I'm not your average editor. And I sort of found a way to spin the story to use this non-traditional experience to my advantage. And you can do that too. So think about what in your background might make you even more qualified for your dream job than other people in that field. And then the final step of the process is thinking about your goals and your future. So what are you actively working towards? Where are you going? And how can you use that to start to position this next step not as a dream, but the reality that you are currently in? And once you sort of think about these elements and pull them together, you can start to tell a story, weave it through your personal brand, weave it through your online presence in a way that makes you look like you are more of a fit than you are now. And here are just a few places that you can sort of tactically tell that new story. So LinkedIn, your other social media bios, definitely your resume. Your resume does not just have to follow the traditional kind of job formula. Some of the things that I've seen career changers do really successfully is to create an executive summary statement at the top of your resume that talks about your transferable skills, that talks about your passion for your new job. So that way the first thing the reader is seeing is this story. It's not, your old job. You can also definitely do this by creating a personal website, creating content on Medium or other social media platforms, and then definitely sort of through the introductions the way you introduce yourself, the conversations that you have with people, think about how you're telling a story that's not just, I'm in sales and I want to be in marketing, but that is really highlighting who you are, again, those transferable skills, those additive skills, and your future and your goals.
And LinkedIn lets everyone publish articles now, so that's a great option too.
They really do.
A whole new website, you could just publish right on LinkedIn.
Yeah, on LinkedIn or on Medium, or and even on on Facebook. A lot of people are doing longer form Facebook content or Facebook Lives.
And Instagram is a great place to tell stories too.
Yeah, especially if you're in a creative field. If you're in design, or if you want to be in kind of design or any kind of social field or social first field, that's a great approach. So let's review what we have learned so far and remind you of the rules. So rule number 1, you have to know exactly where you want to go, and your strategy for doing that is to learn everything you can. Rule number 2 is you have to get experience. The good news is you can make your own. And rule number 3 is dressing for the job you want by building a new brand and telling a new story. So again, these are things that take time. They don't happen overnight. But little by little, as you are going through these steps, you're learning things, you're taking classes, you're meeting people, you're taking baby steps to get experience, things will slowly start to happen. And in the meantime, there are a few things that you can do. So one is to keep an eye out for job opportunities. So maybe there is a company that you'll find a company who's okay with taking somebody with non-traditional experience or is looking for a blended skill set. Even if you don't find that gem, starting to keep an eye out for job opportunities that you're looking for will help you start to get an understanding of what employers are looking for and continue to learn and continue to develop skills towards those job opportunities. You can also think about bridge jobs, and this is what I mentioned before, where you take a job that maybe is not your dream job, but has some characteristics of your dream job. So say you're in sales and you want to work in healthcare. Maybe you then work in sales for a healthcare company and then make a pivot once you're there. So sort of these smaller steps to get you where you want to go. The other thing that a lot of career changers have found success with is working with a career coach. So we have plenty of career coaches on the Muse. This one is one of our coaches who specializes in career transitions, who can, depending on what the kind of move you want to make is, either guide you through the steps that you need to get there, help you build your confidence to get there, help you work on your materials to be more attractive to employers. Basically, do what you need to do to be strategic about how you position yourself and how you make this transition. So at the end of the day, and if there's one thing that I can leave you with is, yes, career changes are really tough. They take time, and that often is time kind of above and beyond your day job. And it takes effort. It's not easy. And in some cases, if you're going back to school, it'll take money, it'll take time. But if you're truly committed to making a move, there are definitely options. And I think in my case, absolutely, it was better than the alternative of staying stuck in a job I hated for years and decades of my career. And the final thing to keep in mind is this is so much more common than it ever used to be. Jobs are changing so much. Social media managers did not exist 15 years ago. Your job and mine did not exist 15 years ago.
True.
And, the more that you learn how to change and adapt, probably the better that you're going to be set up for the rest of your career.
Wow, that was great. Thank you so much. Oh my gosh. Listening to you talk, I realized I've also been through a career pivot. I didn't realize it until I was hearing you talk about it, but, I studied journalism in school. I didn't study social media. This job wasn't really around too much when I was in school, so I started, at an online magazine, and I kind of was helping out with their Facebook, because I thought it was fun, and then I kind of did, like, the slow pivot,
Yeah.
I inched my way into, like, where I am now, which I would say is my dream job. So you could maybe be doing a career pivot and not even realize it.
And that's what I think that's absolutely true. And pivots can be big or small. And sometimes, you might think you need a huge change, but actually making a small change or a small pivot could be what leads you to your dream job without even really knowing it.
Absolutely. So before, we're getting in lots of questions, so keep them coming. Before we have Adrian answer some questions, I have to do my free issue of Forbes pitch real fast. I'm happy to announce that everyone who's registered for today's webinar is eligible for a free trial issue of Forbes magazine, and all the great advice that Adrian shared today will definitely help you with launching your career pivot, but Forbes also offers a ton of other stories and insights to help you on that path as well. To get your free issue, just go to www.forbesmagazine.com/bankable, and you can fill out the form and get your free issue. So now we're going to start answering some of your questions. Let's start off with something kind of basic. How do you know what career you want to explore? So say you're not happy in your current job, and you want to change, but how do you figure out what it is that you actually want to do?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's not basic at all, and it probably is one of the more common ones. when people are changing careers, because it's hard to think about when you're miserable, when you're just sort of have your blinders on and you're doing your job. It's really hard to see what else is out there. So I think a couple of things. So one is to just start talking to people who have jobs that are even semi-interesting to you, or even that you don't know that much about. Sit down with people, ask them about their job, what they love, what they hate, what other jobs are sort of similar to theirs that you could maybe explore. Cast as wide a net as possible and sort of just start talking to people and follow kind of what you're interested in, see where you're engaged, and just keep following those interests. The books that I recommended, The New Rules of Work and Pivot, I think are great if you're totally not sure what you want to do and have a systematic way to break down kind of, you probably can think of jobs that might sort of sound interesting, to explore them and see, is this really what I want to do? Is there something in here that could be the right job for me? This can be actually a very lengthy part of the process. There's few of us who know what we want to be when we grow up, and there's fewer of us that start doing something and know we're not happy and know exactly what we want to move into. It's really important to do some exploration at this phase. And I think another important thing to remember is your dream job next year might not be your dream job 5 years from now.
That's so true.
And
your dream could change.
Your dream could change, and because the world changes too, right? And your dream job looks different at different companies. So to be open and to not put so much pressure on, this is the one job for me forevermore, or this is perfectly the right answer, this is definitely the thing that I want to go into. But be open to what really kind of inspires you and could be the right next step for you right now.
The next question, tips for leveraging LinkedIn. We kind of touched upon this, but if you have just top 3 tips for leveraging LinkedIn.
Well, yeah, LinkedIn can be a great platform for finding people that you're interested in talking to, especially if you're part of alumni groups from your college or high school. There are also groups that are kind of industry related, or just finding people who have interesting jobs and reaching out to them cold. I think the way to use LinkedIn to tell your story, to kind of brand yourself through your headline, your summary, your work experience, your recommendations, a powerful way to start to tell your story beyond your current job. And then, as we discussed before, if you are into writing or even just sharing content that you see online, using LinkedIn's articles tool and kind of post feature to share and contribute content that you're excited about.
Definitely, and join our Bankable LinkedIn group. The link is in the resources section. Here's a good question. Is it best to make 2 resumes, one for your pivot and one for your current role?
It's best to make 1 million resumes.
Ooh, how do you tell?
So when it comes to your resume, you actually want to tweak your resume for every job you apply for. And again, this is not about changing your identity or lying in any way. I'm not recommending that. But your resume it's not a kind of final, it should never be a final document. It should always be a living document, and it should always be a marketing vehicle to sell you as the right person for the job that you are applying to. So every job is going to emphasize different things. You want your resume to emphasize those same things. And again, not a lie, but the things about your background that speak to what that job is looking for. So if you do have this executive summary on your resume, making sure that you are tailoring it for every single job you apply for, making sure that the hiring manager who is looking at your resume for the specific job you're applying for is seeing the things that will make you look like the right fit. You can have sort of versions of it that are, 2 or 3 versions of it. One that is, for jobs in your current field if you're continuing to apply for jobs in your field, and one that is more focused on what you want to do next. But my number 1 tip is to tailor for every job you apply for.
I also, on my resume, I have a section that has I forget what I call it, but it's basically a couple bullet points of things that I'm most proud of that I've accomplished, so I can really just showcase just things that I've really, accomplished. And, if the job application, is looking for someone with that specific skill, like I could put it right into there and just showcase, like, hey, you're looking for someone who has webinar experience. I started a webinar, like, so I could really just showcase, things that they're looking for.
That's a great idea, and the same idea that it's a place where you are pulling right to the top of your resume the things that are going to be, that are your highlights of your experience, that are going to be highlights of what that hiring manager is looking for.
Exactly. Here's a question. How do you find out salary and earnings information for the new career options being evaluated?
Yeah, so you can definitely use online tools like salary.com and PayScale and Glassdoor. That is a great way to get kind of general ranges. I'm also a big fan of talking about salary with your friends. I know this is a little bit controversial, but I think it's getting less so these days. And you definitely don't want to walk up to somebody at a networking event and say, hey, I'm Adrian, how much do you make? But once you start to build a relationship with somebody, I think it's a totally fair thing to ask, what would you expect someone in this type of role at this type of company to make, or do you have any insight into how much this type of role pays?
Is there an appropriate way to ask a coworker to teach you what they do, so you can have some background knowledge about the field you want to move into? Like you said at your a prior job, you kind of knocked on the door of the magazine department and said, hey, can I help? How do you just start that conversation?
Yeah, I think, a couple ways that will depend on who your coworker is and kind of the vibe of your workplace. I think there's a couple of things you don't want to do. You don't want to put your coworker on the defensive. You don't want to make anybody feel like you're trying to steal their job. But, I think a lot of this can be done really well outside of the office. So taking a coworker to coffee, just saying like, hey, like, what are you working on? What do you love about your job? And sharing yours too, sharing what you're working on, what you love about your job, and then also some of the things that you are hoping to learn in the future. I think a lot of people you'd be surprised, a lot of people are also interested in talking about career transitions, and as we talked about before, there's ups and downs, highs and lows of every job, and getting people talking about those things, especially outside of the office, can be a great way to start that conversation.
What would you do if your boss asks you directly about your plans to leave or pivot, especially if you've been doing the legwork to, start your next job?
Yeah, this is a really tough question, and I think, again, this is where it really, really depends on who your boss is, what kind of relationship you have, and where you are at personally. So I have had managers who would have been extremely supportive of a career pivot, and my first manager, I ended up leaving that job and moving across the country, and told her about it, and she was over the moon supportive, offered to be a reference, looked for jobs for me, was so very helpful, and there are many managers out there who are absolutely like that, especially if you're interested in making a pivot within your current company. A supportive manager can actually be a really great ally. That said, I have also had managers who, if I told them I was looking to change jobs, I would have been thrown out on the street the next day.
I think we've all had a manager like that at some point in your career.
So this is really something that you want to think long and hard about and kind of weigh what your personal situation can be. I think if you are in the latter camp, there's a spectrum, right? You can share with your manager, I'm hoping to get some experience in X, Y, or Z because I think it would be a valuable skill set for me to have. Do you think there's any way I could start to take that on within the current company? And that's a way of saying I want to learn more outside of my current skill set. It can make you look really proactive. It can make you look really invested in your own career growth. And it's a way to do it without saying, I hate this job and I can't do it anymore.
Which is never advised.
Which is never advised. Unless you're ready to quit that day.
Can you say generally how much of a pay cut is a mistake when pivoting? So I guess we sort of expect a little bit of a pay cut, you know, if you're going to be changing careers and it's not something you maybe got your degree in. But do you have any advice for pay cuts in general?
A pay cut that you cannot afford personally is a mistake. And again, that's going to be different for every person. You know, you might be able to go down to an entry-level salary for a couple of years. If you have pretty low living expenses, you don't have a lot of debt. If you are, you know, you have some kids, you're the primary breadwinner in your family, that is not going to be a good idea. So it's definitely dependent on your personal circumstances. I would, however, advise the second that you start thinking that you might be wanting to make a major career change that is going to involve a major pay cut, start living below your means. So every time you get a raise, pretend you did not get that raise and shovel that money into savings. Like, see what are the things in your life that you can cut out and shovel that money into savings. If you have a little bit of a cushion, that can make you a lot more comfortable taking time off in between jobs or taking a pay cut. But I definitely do not recommend. I mean, there are people, I have seen people, you know, quit and say, I'll wing it and see what happens. And again, if you are comfortable, you know, sleeping on your parents' couch for a few months, like, great. If you're not, that's a mistake.
A lot to think about.
Yeah.
So you spoke a little bit about how to make time to look at a career change while you're still at your current job. Do you have any actionable tips for maybe how to go about looking for the next job
when you're at your current
job?
Yeah, I think figure out where you can make time in your schedule to do this. I think a lot of us, especially in New York, we're busy all the time. We're working all the time. We have a million commitments. Our days are jam-packed. But if there are times in your day when you can carve out for you and to focus on your career change, whether that is making it a priority to get up, you know, an hour early in the morning, or saying, you know what, I'm not going to eat lunch at my desk. I'm going to go to my car or go to a park or go to a cafe and work on this. Or whether it's kind of the first hour when you come home, you know, tell your family to ignore you and hunker down and do it. But figuring out how to carve out time, regular time in your schedule to focus on this is the most important first step that you can do.
I think we only have time for a couple more questions. So somebody had asked, what is the next step after you've completed your career pivot? So you get the job in the new field that you've been going after, then what?
Enjoy it. No, but really, you know, if you have successfully made a career pivot, it's a huge accomplishment and one that you should enjoy and one that you should be really proud of. With that said, I think it's definitely important to continue evaluating, you know, whether it's every 6 months or every year, how it's going. Like, what do you love? What do you not love? What do you want to learn next? Again, for a lot of people, like, making one major pivot it's not the only pivot you're going to make. I recently made my own kind of second pivot or third pivot or, you know, whatever number pivot, and I'm doing some content strategy consulting work, which is something that I could have never imagined 6 years ago when I started at the Muse. So really just paying attention to kind of what you want from your career, and continuing to kind of make strides and get there.
Last question. A few people have been asking about returning to the workforce after maternity leave or another significant break. Do you have any specific advice for switching careers when you haven't, you know, been in a job for either a few months or a year?
So actually, one of the really interesting things that I've been seeing with some of the companies we've worked out at the Muse is companies offering returnships. So I talked a little bit about adult internships. There's a special kind called a returnship where companies really are investing in people who have been out of the workforce for a while, whether that is, raising a child or taking care of a sick family member or
Mm-hmm.
being in the military, but designed for these people to, in some cases, rotational programs, in some cases, one specialized program, but a lot of bigger companies are offering these now. So take a look at the big companies in your area and see if that might be an option. Um, I think this is also a great time to look for, again, going back to that making your own experience. So
Mm-hmm.
look and see if there are volunteer opportunities, freelance opportunities, opportunities at your child's school or a nonprofit in your area where you can get some of that experience on your resume before you start applying for full-time jobs.
Well, this is such great advice. Thank you so much for joining us today. The last thing I will say is we have an email address, askbankable@forbes.com. So if your question didn't get answered today or you have some follow-ups or a question about a completely different topic, please email us and we will be hopefully posting answers to as many questions as we can. Thank you again, Adrian, for joining us today, and thank you everyone on the line. Please fill out the survey that will pop up on your screen, and have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.